Welcome to Family Fabric, a podcast between myself, Wes, and my mum, Jacqueline, about our family. This episode is about our family from Jamaica to my grandparents, my mum's parents, coming over to England as the Windrush generation. And I'm just going to hand over to my mum, who's going to give an account of both my grandparents traveling over to UK and a bit of history about our family in Jamaica.
So, um, thank you, Wes. I initially began my journey of recording my parents' journey from Jamaica, from the island of Jamaica to the motherland, as they called it back then. And it really came about firstly from reading extracts from a book called Windrush, The Irresistible Rise of Multiracial Britain. I'd read it or read parts of it on several occasions, and really what it led me to was to having a conversation with my dad whilst I was in Jamaica with him and my mum. So I asked my dad if he could tell me if he could briefly tell me a little about his journey um, coming to the UK from the island of Jamaica. And initially, he was somewhat reluctant and did actually say to me quite loudly, "Why are you asking me that question? You've already asked, and I've told you." I then had to confess that yes, he had told me, but I didn't remember the details. And now I wanted to actually write it down and have documented proof of the conversation that we had had. So, when I think about it now and having read about the experiences of a lot of people that came over from the various islands, they were very suspicious about sharing information as to where they came from, um, who they were related to, and where that information was going to. So I could kind of understand why he was reluctant to tell me at first. But initially, after we'd overcome all of that, he then did proceed to tell me that in 1960 he came on a ship called HMS Begonia. He traveled from Jamaica. He passed through or docked in quite a few islands and countries. I know one of them that he mentioned would have been in Spain, en route to coming to the UK. He talked about the fact that he enjoyed he enjoyed the social aspect of being on a ship, obviously it being a very new experience for him. It took him 18 days to arrive from Jamaica to Britain. He talked about the food that he had, that the food was prepared by Jamaican chefs, that the food was really good. He mentioned how he enjoyed eating the bread rolls with the butter. Again, something I think that he wouldn't have been familiar with coming from the background that he came from. He went as far as to say that he could have eaten them until his belly hurt him, which is I think, quite a common expression with Jamaicans and people from the islands. He mentioned that as far as he was concerned, it was the best way that he could have ever travelled to the UK. So that was my dad's journey. My mum, having heard my dad telling his account or giving his account of his journey to the UK, she proceeded to then tell me her own story. So my mum came in 1962 and she travelled by an aircraft. I do remember her talking about the fact that you've got to remember that my parents both come from districts, communities that are very rural. So when she left her district, she left her community and went to the city, which would have been Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. She talks about where she stayed before she would have boarded this flight to make her way to the UK. She said that was the actual, while she was in Kingston, it was the first time she'd ever been to the cinemas. So she actually went and saw a movie. She told me the name of the movie that she went to see, but I, for love of money, cannot remember exactly what it was. But she, you know, really had what I'd call a memorable experience. Although it was completely different to my dad's, she had a very memorable experience of her journey from her very small community to coming to the motherland. So she flew on a BOAC, which then was known as British Overseas Airway Corporation flight to Gatwick Airport. She was met there by a welfare officer because, as she said, my dad, who was supposed to be meeting her, who she had sent a letter to forewarn him that she was gonna be arriving at said date and said time, was not there. The welfare officer, after going to great lengths to try and basically connect her with my dad, decided that he would take her to his home because, having looked at the address as to where my dad was living, it wasn't far from where he lived. So he told my mum he was going to be taking her to his flat, at which point my mum was quite alarmed and thought, for God knows why, but thought this man was going to take her to his flat to rape her. I believe Wes said she told him a very similar account.
Yes, she did. So she said that she felt that he thought about what he said. He'd said it very innocently, no intention of anything like that. But when he thought about it, woman just come over to the country, doesn't know anyone, strange man says he's going to take her to his flat. He thought about it and he said, "Oh, don't worry, loves. I won't do anything to you." Which I said to her, I'm sure plenty of people who have done something said that as well. But he turned out to be very genuine and legit as to his intentions of helping her.
And yeah, and so um it follows through that he made, from what I understand, a couple of journeys to where my dad was residing, the address that was given, and I think it was at the second or third attempt he got there, and my dad had come back. My dad was actually out. It was a, from what I understand, it was a Saturday night, Saturday evening, and my dad had gone out drinking with his friend at the local pub, and they apparently were gonna go. They'd left from the pub to go to a house party, which was quite a common thing back in those days, in the 60s. Was going to a house party, but when they got there, the entrance fee to go to the house party, my dad said he wasn't prepared to pay that money, and so they came back. They came back to um, where they were staying, where they were living. And when I think about it, if my dad, if my dad had possibly been prepared to pay the money to to go to this house party, maybe maybe my mum maybe my mum wouldn't have seen him for, until maybe Monday or so. But anyway, he came back. The welfare officer arrived. I think there was a note that had been left to say, were you Herbert Herbert Alexander Hall, expecting a Rosalind Monica Pinnock. And my dad said he and his friend followed this gentleman, the welfare officer, to his flat, where there my mum was, who was as so like so relieved to see him, and they proceeded to take her back to where they were living. I believe the welfare officer now remembering parts of the story. The welfare officer's flat was somewhere like in Stockholm or Vauxhall, and my dad's home was in Brixton. And my dad said they walked there and they walked back. And I thought to myself, my poor mum, after having had that long flight, to to then have to walk from Vauxhall or Stockholm, whichever it was, to Brixton. But I think she was just so thankful, so thankful to see him. That I don't think maybe she even thought about the walk from one destination to the other. I was just thinking, Wes, there's another like this is an extended family member um story. So I had an uncle. He's sadly passed away. Um Uncle Ezrin. He met his wife because not because he sent for her, somebody else sent for her. But then apparently when she arrived, um I can't remember if she was on a flight or she was on a ship, which it was, but when she arrived, that gentleman was not there to meet her. And I believe the story goes it's that my Uncle Ezra, went down there. I don't know if he went there. Well, I'm assuming he didn't go there to. He hadn't sent for anyone, but I think the story goes that it's like, oh, you go down there, and there's a possibility of meeting a wife. And so she went. She went with my Uncle Ezra. So it's kind of bizarre, isn't it,
Yeah,
that people would. So they would have sent money for a sweetheart. Maybe it might not been a sweetheart. Maybe it might have been somebody that they were pen pal, they were talking to,
yeah.
corresponding with, and then had second thoughts when the
Oh,
day
dear.
the day arrived and just didn't turn up. Or the other example I have of another family member was that the this is again an aunt arrived, and the my uncle was not there. Did When he got there, she wasn't there at the pickup point,
Mm,
and so she made her way to said area.
yeah.
And he then, I think, yeah, she arrived in London, and they were living in, I think, in Norfolk or Suffolk, and she'd made her way down there, and he then had to make his way back
Yeah.
to kind of locate her. So they kind of like missed each other
Yeah.
along the way, because then you've got to think about those days. There was no such thing like a mobile phone that you
Yeah.
could ring and say,
It
well, this is the point where I'm
it
at.
really makes you appreciate how lucky we are in a sense with, yeah,
Communication.
that we have so many methods of communication, and you can say, okay, I'll put a pin so you can see where my location is.
Yeah.
But no, you just had to, even for a very long time after that, had to, if you were to meet somebody
Mm.
somewhere, you had to just meet them there at the time.
Yeah.
And if they didn't turn up, you either had the option of go home. Well, obviously that was an option for someone coming from another country,
Yeah.
or wait and
Yeah.
hope that they turned up soon and such.
Exactly. And then you think about like how resourceful they were.
Yeah.
And the resilience of,
Mm,
I mean, you know, you arriving in a country that you've never been to
mm,
before, culturally, the environment, the aesthetics
yes.
of it, the dialect
Yeah.
is just so
Just
foreign.
because you speak the same language, it doesn't mean that you understand the people who are speaking the same language to you, because as you said, the dialects
Yeah,
are different. You may not be used to hearing an actual English person speaking English.
yeah,
Things like maybe even the money. You're
yeah,
not familiar with that, because I know um going to Jamaica, I'm not used to the money despite the amount of times I've gone there,
yeah.
and I could imagine somebody possibly struggling with having, if you have, well, I assume you would have cash, but
Mm,
you've got cash, but you don't know just by looking at it what it is straight away. Whereas we know, oh, this is this coin, that's that coin, and you could do it quite fast.
Yeah, this is very true. But yeah, so that's just like a few accounts of family members that traveled over from Jamaica to the motherland, as they called it then, and eventually settled in various parts of the United Kingdom.
Mm. What it is we're going to give you a bit of context about my grandparents and my mum's parents, where they came from, and who their family were, who their siblings and their parents were.
Okay, so my dad, my dad's family, um, my dad's father, he came from an area called Orange Hill, which is in Westmoreland, and the story goes that I'm not quite sure how he found his way, because logistically, because I do know Jamaica well enough now to know the like the distance from one point to the other, and bearing in mind this is the days when there was no real form of public transportation.
Car ownership, that wasn't what it is now in Jamaica, I'm guessing.
I think even back then
Yeah,
they motor vehicles would have been a no-no
yeah.
in the area that my parents
Yeah.
grew up, and they were born and they grew
So
up
that
in.
sort of distance, in terms of if you were then walking, or would there be, like, say, donkeys or mules or stuff? Well,
Mules,
they
yeah.
wouldn't be moving that fast.
No,
That would be
no.
quite a distance to be
And
traveling.
and to be perfectly honest, also to even own a donkey or a mule, you had to have had money, because
Okay.
again, I guess like owning an animal, a form of transportation like that, would have been like owning maybe a motor car,
Yeah. Yeah.
effectively. But my grandfather um met my grandmother. Again, as I said, I'm not quite sure how they came across each other, but he met my grandmother. Her name, my grandmother's name, was Loretta Hall. Sorry, Loretta Williams. She went on to then become Loretta Hall. Her mother, name was Helen Williams, and she married a gentleman named Joe Black. He was not my grandmother's biological father. Apparently, her biological father's name was, which is like really bizarre, um, in the sense that they say his name was William Williams.
Oh,
Yeah, and apparently he went off to Cuba and never
wow.
returned. Yeah, so that's my grandmother on my dad's side. My dad's name was Gustavus Robert Hall, and his mother's name was Elizabeth Hall, but they called her Liza. And she and my grandfather went on to have children, quite a number of children. So there was my Aunt Doris, then there was my Aunt Edna, then there was I now remember my Aunt Clarabelle, who passed away at a very young age. Then there was my uncle Radolph, then my dad, then my Aunt Daphne, whose nickname was Tatty. They called her Aunt Tatty. Then there was my Aunt Babsy, whose name is Barbara. Then there was my Aunt Fren, whose name was May. And then finally there was my Uncle Melly, whose full name was Melrose.
Hmm.
And those were the children that my grandparents
Yeah.
had.
So that was 9 children.
Yeah, nine
Yeah.
children they had. Um, my mom, her family is a much smaller number. So and it's also unique because My mum effectively is the only child for her father. Her father's name, William, sorry,
Richard.
Richard Smith, and they called him Marswitty. And her mum's name was Agnes Rowe, and she married a gentleman named Pinnock, and that's how my mum got her surname. Because despite the fact that this gentleman had been dead and gone for many years, my grandparents weren't married and were obviously having a relationship, and my mum was the consequence of that. And for back in those days, it was considered a
Scandalous.
scandal
Mm,
for children to be born effectively out of wedlock. So, although I'm quite sure it did happen,
mm.
my mum got her mother's dead husband's surname, so she became Rosalind Pinnock, even though effectively she was Rosalind Smith. Yeah, so my 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 mum's side of family. But I
Yeah.
know that, like, I don't know, did Nana talk to you about other members, family members?
So you mentioned your granddad, Richard Smith, and serving in the First World War.
Yeah.
But what I found out recently, late last year, was that his brother, I didn't get his name, served in the Second World War in the RAF. And I was always really interested in the story about great granddad Richard Smith and serving in the First World War because every year in Britain we say, lest we forget, but our depiction of those who served in the World War One and Two, very rarely features anybody but white British people, despite the fact that thousands upon thousands of people from all over the Commonwealth served in the First and Second World War. And I had never heard any stories about from anyone else that I knew who was of Afro Caribbean heritage about any relatives that served. The only one I'd heard personally was from my grandmother and from yourself about my great granddad. And then so it was really nice to hear then a second story within the family of his brother. And Nana said, oh, she wasn't sure if he served in the First or Second World War, but I came to believe that it was the Second World War because I don't believe the RAF existed in the First World War because I don't believe there really were many planes back then for
Mm.
there to really be. I don't think there were no planes, but I just don't think there were that many. So
Yeah.
that was a story that I came to, a bit of history I came to know of quite recently of our family.
Yeah. So just a little more of a snippet about my mum's side of family. So according to my mum, um, her mother's um her mother's side of family originally came from the parish of St Elizabeth and moved to Westmoreland, but apparently their origin is from Madagascar. I'm not
Yeah,
quite sure how accurate that is, but that is what I have been told by my mum. So she talks about my great 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 grandmother being called Benjamina Bell, and she having three daughters, and one being my great grand aunt Alice. She also talks about my great grandmother, whose name was Wilhelmina MacDonald, who had seven children, one being my grandmother, whose name was Agnes. And then the other children were William Rowe, Alan Rowe, who I did meet, and my children met him, Emma Rowe, Mary Rowe, Ruby Rowe, and George Rowe, nickname Uncle Boss. Then she talks about my grandmother, and this is my mum's mother, Agnes Rowe, who had four children. And the first would be her son, Laboratory
mm.
Samuel Pinnock, nicknamed Sonny. Then she had Jennifer. Then finally there was my Aunt Emily, Louise Pinnock, nicknamed Panaisi, and my mum being the baby, who was named Rosalind Monica Pinnock Smith Hall. So that's my mother's side of family. Doesn't know a great deal about her dad's side of family, but what she did tell me was basically this: that my great grandfather on my grandfather's side name was William Smith, and my grandfather's name was Richard Smith, and he was born the 8th of May 1898. And he had a sister named Mabel Maud Smith and a brother named Ferdinand Smith. My grandfather fought in the First World War as a young man. He travelled from Jamaica to Europe and was a member of the British West Indian Regiment. And basically, that's really sort of like a background idea of where our family is coming
Yes.
from the island of Jamaica.
I think it's really important to make this podcast because I think our stories need to be out there. They need to be documented. People need to know about our histories. We need to know about it. Other people need to know about it. And with not to be negative and dark, but the Windrush generation are of a certain age now. And I think if we don't record and document these stories, these histories, those stories, they are sadly possibly going to just die with them. And who is then going to know about them?
It's very true. Um, and I think, you know, um, I'm not quite sure, being first generation of Black British,
Mm.
um, of coming from immigrant parents, I'm not quite sure if my generation was any better at carrying these stories forward to
Mm.
share with our children. So I think this is also um, another important and vital way of sharing
Yes.
that as I call it, tapestry
Yeah.
of the fabrics of our family journey.
I think that for us, this podcast is also a form of bonding that we see as very important. And I think in the statement that you made, I think in fairness, looking at documentaries I've seen about first generation Black British, Afro Caribbean, or African children, I think you had a lot of pressures growing up, um, cultural clashes of having a different culture to your parents, being the first generation trying to survive and hopefully thrive. And I think now we are a lot more established. And I think that's where then my generation, the second generation, and further generations, we can support each other to document these things and put them out there and inform ourselves and others about ourselves and our histories.
Mm, I totally agree. And so I feel that, hopefully, this introduction to what our podcast is leading towards, because this is just our first step, will encourage other people to either follow us or simply create their own narratives
Mm.
in
Yes,
another form of media, be it a podcast or written words, um, or even video footage
yeah,
of interviews.
definitely.
Yeah,
So I think that is the end of the first episode, isn't it?
yeah, I'd say
And
so.
I'd like to thank you all for listening to Family Fabric, and I hope you will follow us and you will follow us to see what we do next.
Thank you for listening to us.